Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome, or maybe you saw the beginning of this series of HTTP methods that started last week. Now we are going to look at the put methods. Last week we created this awesome application that was called the message application, and we actually exposed a REST endpoint. Let me just show you. We created all of these files right here. It was a lot of fun. We created a lot of files. We got a controller. We had an entity. We had a repository. If you don't know what all of this is, then look at the other video. Watch that. If you know what this is, then just then lean back, get some coffee, and let us continue. Because what happens now? This cool message entity that we have right here, and the purpose was to store a message for another IT department, for a third-party IT department, and they actually wanted to store a string. The first thing that we said was that we would actually like to define our own endpoint where we actually receive an object instead. So this is a JSON object where we have the message inside. We have also separated our entity from the REST API. So we have a request, which is right here, and then we have the response, which is right here. We are using the builder pattern whenever we can from Lombok, and we are quite happy with this. We enriched the data with something called save time and also response time. Every time we give a response to the third-party IT system, then we actually add the response date time as a kind of a receipt, or as it is a receipt actually. So, but what happens now? The third-party IT department comes now and they say, okay, it is nice that you are storing all of these messages, but we have changed our mind now. We also want some additional data to be stored. We want an author right here. We want to see who actually created this message, and whenever it is messages, then it's actually poets. So it's poetry, and then the authors can actually upload their favorite piece of poetry. Can you please support us with that? And yes, then we say yes, of course we can do that, because we were not lazy in the beginning when we designed our system. Then we can just add all of these fields to our request. So now we also have author. And also to the response right here. Here we also have author. You might say, but this is a lot of mapping that we have to do. We have to map both to the request and to the response. Yes, there's a lot of mapping, but on the other hand, if you don't do all of this mapping, and if you just return the entity, then you would actually have your code will look messy, and you will also have some you will actually try to fix to have your code look like both what should look like when we actually convert into JSON, and what should it look like when we want to store it to the database, and all of that code will be mingled together, and you will get a headache, and it will be very, very ugly, and at some point you might actually have to do this anyway. So just start with this. Start with separating REST responses and requests into new classes. You will be happy in the long run, and it does not take that long. So try to see here how fast we can actually do this. So now we actually have this author also mapped to the response, and we also have it right there in the requests. And we actually create a mapper method on the. Where do we create the map? In the service? We had a service right here, and here we created the mapper methods. So here we say that we actually create a new entity. So here we also want to add the author now. So REST request new message dot get author. And some people might sit and ask right now, but Mike, wouldn't you like this to be a new version of the API? And isn't that the REST way? Yes, the REST way is that you actually create an API that never changes. And that means that when you get changes, then every time you change, you will actually have a new context that says /v1 or something like that, version 1, or maybe like version 1 like this, and then version 2, version 3, version 4, 5, etc., etc., etc. But because we know who actually uses and consumes this REST service right here, then we do not have that concern. I can actually reuse the existing, and I only have to maintain one version of the REST API. So I don't have to add versions at all. I just go and talk and have maybe a lunch talk with one of the developers from the other from the other department, and then we agree that that's fine that we do not use versions, and it's fine that now suddenly we actually add support for author in along with along with the message. Remember yesterday we were actually looking at the methods, the HTTP method, that's what was in focus. The post mapping is for when you want to create a new object. It is also for if you are doing an action, if you're triggering some action that actually has side effects, then you also use the post mapping. If you want to update something, then you use the put mapping, and that is exactly what we want to do tonight. I want to update, and right here we will actually say just / like this, and then we will actually have a path variable with the ID. So here we will actually have the ID like this. And I think we need to use curly brackets right here instead of the colon. So then we will say ID, and then we say public, and then again we would like to give a good response, and we can actually reuse the response from the other API right here. That's okay. It's from the other endpoint. So we say response new message. That's fine. We could also call it something more generic than new message. We could also create a whole new response that's also up to us. The most important thing is that it should not be your entity. It should not be your database entity that you return. I know that I do that a lot in my in my videos, but that is just to prove some kind of technology. Then I do it to make the videos a bit faster paced, and also so we don't have to spend time on the mapping, obviously. Here we say update message. So this is update message. And then here we say path variable. Look, what is this annotation right here? Path variable. And then we can say message ID. I want to return this also. I want to change this to message ID like this. Message ID right here. And that is a long message ID right here. And path variable, I can name it if I want to. I can actually name it here. So that means that the variable right here does not need to have the same name right here. If I just remember to set the name right here, so I could actually leave it out right now, but I will just add it just to be very verbosely about what's actually going to happen. So now we want to update this. So now we have the message ID. Then we also need a payload request body, and we get that by using request body like this. And then again we can actually steal this code right here and then say REST request new message. Of course, we could actually convert this to an update message instead. That would of course be a bit nicer. But if it is exactly the same fields, then you could choose to reuse. As soon as these two need to differ, maybe when you create your message, maybe you need some other information than when you need to update it. Maybe you need to have an update reason or something. Then, of course, you would change the classes right here. So then you would get a new request and a new response for each of your endpoints. So, but I would say you should reuse them sometimes, but as soon as they start to differ, create a new class for each endpoint actually, both for the request and for the response, of course. So, but here we have the request update message. So here we have update message where we can change stuff, and this is cool because we might have some messages where we did not add the author to begin with, and then we can actually add the author later on. So when we are using the put mapping like this, then we actually expect to get usually you will get the whole representation of the object. So that means that you will not just have the message, for instance, and then only update the message part. You will actually get the whole representation of this object right here. You will get all of the fields. That is what we would expect when we have a put mapping right here. So sometimes, what about sometimes? Isn't there sometimes where it could both be a put mapping or a post mapping? Yes, if you want to update maybe just one field or if it has side effects, then it could both be a put mapping and a post mapping, and no one will actually complain to you that you use put instead of post or the other way around. But when it is as clear as this, where you just want to edit the whole object, then you want to use put. We should try to follow the rules, follow the REST rules, and then use put whenever we want to update the whole object like we do right now. So let us see what happens right here. I can actually steal this code right here, and then we have a service. So we have a message service right here. Here we will actually say update message, and then we will say take this message right here, the message update right here. The method, it does not exist in our service yet, so I'll press Alt-Enter, and then I'll say create methods like this, and then it automatically jumps to my message service.java file right there. That's quite cool, especially if you're a bit lazy or you want to create code fast, then Alt-Enter is a good way to create new methods and to jump there right away. So what do we do? First of all, we need to update. We actually need the ID, so that's the first thing we need. We need the message ID right here. So we actually need that also. So it was a bit of an error that we forgot to do that, but that's okay. We need the ID, and of course now we have one related problem, and that is because when we are calling here, we need to add the ID also here in our controller. Message ID. So the controller has the ID. It passes this on to the service. Remember, your controllers. This should be very. There should not be much happening there. That should be regarding what should we return, and maybe we have to call multiple services. So this should actually be. This should be very easy to read your controllers, and then you can hide away all of the ugly code in the services instead, like we do right here. So now we have the ID. So the first thing we will actually do is we will actually fetch find by ID, find by ID, and this is the message repository that we created last week. And here you can actually see that this is a JPA repository, and we only create the interface. Spring Data will actually create the implementation by itself, so that is quite fine. Before we continue, I want to set some key mapping. Shouldn't have done that before I started the video. No, it's okay. Then you can actually see what I do and how I use my shortcut keys. First of all, navigate. I like to use just Alt and then left, and it's already assigned, but it's assigned to something like select previous tab in main menu. I don't want to use that, so I'll just remove the other one. So now we have Alt left, that will go back and forward. Alt right, I just like to use those ones, so I'll press OK, and then I'll remove the other meaning of Alt right, and then I'll press OK. That means that then if I want to go back to my file, and I can just press Alt back, then I will jump to where I was editing code, and it's much faster to go back and forward. Most of your programming is actually just to navigate between files. If you need to find a file, you can press Ctrl-N, and then you can actually search for like controllers or services or entities, if that's what you want to, and then you can go to them. But we do not want to do that now. I want to create my message server where we are finding something by ID. I will give the message ID right there. Here and it leads to an optional, and this optional, if it is empty, if by ID.is empty. There's also other ways to write this, but then I want to throw an exception. Throw new legal state exception or legal argument. Legal argument, that's better, because it is the ID we got that is illegal. So we say no message has been found with ID, and then the ID. So then we get that in the log whenever we if the client gives us an ID that does not exist, then we will actually then we can see this in the log. The client will just experience a HTTP code 500 for a internal server error. So the server error is not that nice. I will make another video about how you can actually create nice. I've actually already done that, but I think I'll create a new one. It's quite old now, where you can actually see how to create nice error codes, nice return response. Nice responses to where you have an error instead of these ugly 500 and then no explanation to what actually went wrong. Then you can actually also say what went wrong. But that's another story. We will play around with that another day. You can also, one option is actually also to always return 200 and then just return the error inside your objects. That's also okay. That's why we sometimes want to add a receipt to all of the responses that we are creating. So here, if download is empty, then okay. So now we have checked that this actually exists. So that means that we know that we have a message. So then we say set. Now get first, so now we're getting it. So this means that now we have actually our message right here. Message entity, that's fine, just message. So now we can actually build on that. So we want to update that. So we say message.set, and the setters has been changed or what? Where's my setters? Okay, that is because we are using, that's because I was so smart last time. I added something called accessors, and then I said chain true and fluent true also. The cool thing about setting fluent true, that means that your getters will actually be removed. So you will not be removed, it will just be named without get. And your setters will also be without set in front. And this means that you cannot by mistake convert this to JSON, because then JSON will actually it will actually puke with a with an exception. So that is one good thing about doing this, and it looks much nicer. That's why I do it. And then the chain means that all of the setters will then return the same object, right there. So that is why. Message.message, so that means that if I want to set something, then I just say message.message, that is the string that we want to set in there, and I want to take that from the request. This is too long, right? This is too long. Let's just say REST request. It's way too long, all of it. Yes, and then we say get message. Yes, that's fine. And on our requests and responses, of course, we cannot use that accessor trick right there, because then Jackson will puke, and then will give an error, because it needs the getters and setters in order to work. And then because we have that chain set to true, then we can actually then set the next field, which is author. So we can also set the author, REST request, and then we will actually get the author. So now we are setting all of these fields right there, and then and then we're actually happy, and it means we can actually wrap all of this in a repository that's save, and then we can save our entity right here, because this setter right here, it actually returns the entity itself. That is quite cool, right? Look at this code, how beautiful it is. Save something, update something, and then we are actually done. And of course, then we get the updated version, the saved version right here. And then we can return multiple things. Here we have the response right here. And I think that yesterday, or last week, it was actually yesterday I made it, but it was officially it's last week, if you look at the upload time. So then if you say from entity, so that means that from entity, I can actually create this response right here. That was a static utility method that I created last time. So I can actually create a new REST response just out from the entity that we have right here. And that is okay, because you are hiding away this code in something that is only used for your REST response. So it's actually okay to place something like this right here. You could also argue that you don't like this method right here. Then you could place it in a service instead. But I think this is actually fine. It's fine in your REST responses that you add some pragmatic code like this right there. Okay, so that's actually it. Update message. Then of course we want to see that whether it works or not. And one way to do that is to update our test, of course. And yeah, this is happy right now. Message ID, and let us then update the test. I can just press Alt Insert right here, and then we can say create the test. We already created one test yesterday, didn't we? Let me just check right here. That's actually message control. Yeah, we already have the test right here. This means that when you already have the test and you say create the test again, then it will just update the file. If we choose to update message like this. Yes, update existing class. Yes, this is exactly what we wanted. Thank you very much, Spring and IntelliJ. It was actually IntelliJ that made this. So, and then we say first we say message controller dot update message. But first we need some kind of First we'll create a new message like this. Then we will say create new message. Then we'll say REST request message like this, and we'll use a builder. And then we will give some kind of message like, now it's poetry, right? So then it's like roses are red, violets are blue, spring boot, I love you. So that's it, yeah. And that author is Mike, right? So then we can create that. Then we can create that message. We can create that beautiful piece of poetry right here. And that is our new message right here. And then we will get a response. Inside the mic response right here, we will actually have an ID. Yes, we will have an ID. That's right there. That's very important. So that means that when we want to update our message afterwards, then we will give the mic.getID right there, so that we have the ID. And then we need to create a REST request update message. So, okay, and that's also fine. So then we say REST requests, and it's actually, we know that it's actually the new message, but we will reuse it anyway. So then I'll say message, then we will update this to, I think we will actually, what we'll update this to? We'll actually set it to the same. Or change it to something else, like Java, I love you. Kotlin, it could also be Kotlin. It could be a lot of things, right? We could also change it to something totally different. Like we can make a story instead. Once upon a time. And then the author again, in this situation, it could actually be Jane. And then we create that request right there. And so, yeah, and then we can actually, then we get something back, we get a response, which is right there. When we do this, of course, then we need to check in the database that this is actually, that this was actually okay, that this is actually how it is. So we need to actually get access to the repository, message repository like this. We could also create a get. We could also create a get endpoint in the controller. I think that might actually have been a bit cleaner. But now, for this situation right here, we will just create this message repository right here, and then we can actually fetch the case right here. And did you see that actually I used AutoWired? AutoWired can only be used in the tests, of course. You want to in the constructor inject when you are dealing with real code. You can only use AutoWired in the Spring Boot tests and down in the test code, just so you know. So, okay, so then we say repository dot find by ID, and then this time we will say give me the ID, mic.getID, right here. Say by ID, and first of all we assert a lot of things. A good test always have some assertions. I can see this is Jupyter, this is JUnit 5 because it has Jupyter in the name. Of course, JUnit 4 is used less and less. You can see that it's JUnit 4 if the package names, I'll just go up in the top right here. If your imports does not have Jupyter, but it has just JUnit, then it's JUnit 4. Jupyter is the 5th planet from the sun. That's why they used that. Okay, so then we say assert not null. We can also say assert true. Assert true. And then we say by ID, and then we say that this should be present. Is present, yes. And then we can then say assertions dot assert not null. And then we can assert by ID dot get, and then we can get all of them. Then we say the ID should not be null, and let us just duplicate that. We also want the message should not be null. We also want the author should not be null. The save time should not be null. And then if we want to, we can print it out in the end right here. Remember, it is important that you create a flexible tests, but of course in this situation right here, we're actually setting these texts right here, so we can actually create a constant from this. So that means that we can actually say final string message, and then we say this message update, and here we create the same with just a author update, because then I can use it to check in my test later on if it's actually message update like that. He will take the Jane, and then I will say author update right here. Author update. Yeah. And then we will print out the by ID.get. So then we'll print out the object right here. But first we actually want to assert some equal stuff. Assertion assert equals. And then we will say that author update, comma, by ID.get get the author. Yes, that's fine. That was a good assertion. And then we do the same with the message string. Message update, yes, by ID, and then the message right there. So that we assert that. So, and then we print it out in N just to see what we actually got. We could also print it out in the beginning. Shift Alt and then up and down, then you can actually print it out. I can actually print it out right there. After I've seen that it's actually present and not null, then I can print it out if I want to. If you create really good assertions, then you don't need to print it out at all, of course. Now we'll press the play button right here, and that is how easy it is to run a test with IntelliJ. A lot of things I think is annoying with IntelliJ, but it is the best tool for developing Java projects. Sometimes it can be very slow, as at least with WSL, and then you will sit and be a bit grumpy about it. But it is still the best integrated development environment for Java development. Message entity, so this is it, and it's actually green, so that means that all of our assertions are okay. They are just as we expect. That's quite good. Okay, so but now what happens? What happens? Couldn't it also be cool that if we just have one field? Let us say that some of the fields are null, then we do not want those to be set to null. In some cases, you actually want them to be set to null. But you could actually create your service right here. So if it is null, then you would actually not update it at all. So then you would just set the original message right there. And of course, that could be done with a ternary expression. A ternary expression. What is that, you ask? Then I say, oh, didn't you take your developer's exam and your developer certificate? And then you say, no, I just jump-started my career by taking a job so I could make some money. And I say, okay, good choice. Then you learn it now instead. That's fine. So now we are using the ternary expression. So that means that we will say that, let's say that the user did not give us any message, then we do not want to update it. So that means that if this is null, if the client did not give us any message, then we want to do something like if it is null. If it is not null, we will always look at the most. I will always look at the most likely scenario, and then we will actually use that. If it is null, then we will then use the original message. Then we'll use the original value. So this is how we do that. Quite easy. Is it not null? Then use the REST request like that. If it is null, then use the author like that. Some people don't like that we actually ask that we say not right here, and they would actually instead of looking at the not case, then they would actually say that we should look at the is case instead. And to those people, and then I kind of understand you. So now I'm actually changing it like this. So if it is null, then we will. It's much easier to understand for our brains, especially when we are tired and a bit low on coffee. Then this is better. So this means that if it's null, then we will use the original author. If the message is null, then we'll use the original message, or else we will use whatever we get from the REST endpoint. That's cool. We could also create a nice test for that. We will not do that right now because I want to jump forward to something else, because now we actually, when we're dealing with these controllers right here, it's fine with the nice unit. Of course, we want to run the unit test again to see that everything is fine. And we could also create a test where we actually have the null value in that. Let us just do that. It's actually quite fast. So I will actually say copy this one, Control D for duplicate. So then we have update message with null author. So now we will actually try to update with where the author is null. Or I'll just not mention the author at all. And then we will actually expect that the author has the original mic.getAuthor. It should be the same as it was original. So let us just create that. Yeah, that's actually how easy it is to create them. When you have one test, you can just duplicate them. Of course, you could also create something a bit nicer. But I think this is quite nice, actually. So let's see right now. Expected, not null. Yeah, of course. Yeah, but it should not be null. Okay, so now suddenly it has been... Oh, that's because we... Sorry. I made a mistake right here. .author. Mike. It was not here. We should have changed it. It was in the change, of course. Here, when we are changing, when we are updating our bean, when we are updating our entity, sorry, then of course we do not want to. Then we want the author to be null. We want to create it with a value, but we do not. But we want to update it with something that is not there. So let us just press play again and actually see what happens. And the author down here, it's also wrong now. So now we should actually. It's probably here it complains now, right? So of course we need to. Still need to use our brain when we create a test. We cannot, yeah. So that would actually be Mike dot get author. Yeah. We should still use our brain, even though we copy paste. When you copy paste, you still need to, yeah, your brain still needs to be on. So, and now it's green. So it's exactly as we expected. So the author has not been updated. Of course, when we print out stuff, then of course now we need to print out. Let me just check. Something just went wrong right there. So here we have that. We have the get ID. We are building this right here, and. Okay, I know what actually it still works. It's just because in my entity, let me go to my entity. Where is my entity? Is right there. We need to update the toString method because we have a. The reason why we're creating this toString method by hand and not just writing add toString up here is because we don't like to do that when we are dealing with entities, because what actually would happen is as soon as I add my first relation, then you will have toString methods generated on both sides, and then you would have then you get a Stack Overflow exception. So that is why we want to create the toString methods by ourselves, and we can actually have IntelliJ to do that like this. So now we have the author right there. Let us press play again, and then we will get the author in the output also. Yeah, so when you have entities like this, and then you should not have your toString method auto-generated. You should, and that is also why you don't want to automatically convert it to JSON, because usually you would have relations where you have a reference to the same object on both sides, and that will actually give you an infinite loop. Now it works. Let us see. Author Mike right there. We are so happy. I'm so proud of myself with these tests right here. But yeah, no but. We say and. If you say but, that means that you will cancel out the first part of your sentence. So I'll say and. Now we will start up the application. Yes, now we'll start up the application. It is right here. Start up the application, because we want to test it from the outside, because this is all good that we can actually do some unit tests locally, but now we want to start the application, then we want to test it, and the way we do that is with these cool HTTP files right here, because then we use the built-in. If you go to tools, then you can see there's a HTTP client right there, and you can actually create these requests, and you can also get some cool examples. I already have a good example right here, so that means that I can just copy my file. I would say that you should have these files. Just create a folder for your files, and then you will say, yeah, then you can have them there. Update message.http. Add it to Git. Thank you very much for that. So update message, that means that then I need to put, that is the method, and the ID, we need some ID right here, of course. So let us see when we get the ID. The message should not be oranges are good. It should be apples are also good. That means that then the message will be overwritten with this. We can also set the author to something like Paula. And when we create the message, let us just try that. We will only give, should we try only, let us just try only give the message, so there's no author right here. And here we have new message with post. So let us try to run this one right here first. Then we get a response. Here in the response, we get the ID. Oranges are good. Author is null. Yeah, we have not set it. So, okay, then we know that now this is ID 1. So then I'll go to my other HTTP right here. Then I'll say, okay, this is number 1. Please put something new there. And let us press play and see what then happens. And now we get this response right. Instead, apples are also good and also polar. So this means that it works. What we actually tried there, it was actually we started our application, then we used the HTTP client to actually reach our application, and then we got a response code back, which is right here. That is right here. And then it also says how long it took to actually call the endpoint. So it's like a curl just inside your IDE. So this is actually much faster. In old days, I always use curl, but it takes a bit longer to write those curl scripts than it does to use these HTTP files right here. There are also some people that like Postman. There's also some people that like Thunder Client for VS Code instead. That's a plugin for VS Code. But this is actually what I wanted to show you tonight. Do I want to show anything else? We could also have a get. We could create a get endpoint. We will save that for I'll create a new video for delete also. So how we should actually delete an integer, how we should delete an object with REST. But this is the put mapping. Use it for updating. Post mapping. Use it for something that has side effect, or use it for when you create a new object that did not exist already. Okay, let me just go back to this screen right here. Have a great evening. I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.